So when Annalisa and Kike reached out to invite me to talk about this, my first thought was, you want me to talk about downtown? Downtown is my love language. You might not get me off this stage. And so I'm going to tell you about one of the things that I'm the most passionate about, which growing up, I never would have expected that I would have fallen in love with downtown and think about downtown, but I think about it a lot. And so today I want to talk to you about downtown and why downtown matters, because I grew up most of my life never thinking about it, never worrying about it, just thinking it was something that I was there and I had to visit every once in a while, but it really does matter. And so if you were like me, you might think, hey, what does downtown have to do with me? You know, I don't live near downtown. I don't work downtown. I don't know anything about downtown, but I want to move you today, if you think like this, to knowing and believing that downtown is critical for everybody and it's critical for every single part of the city. And so the way that I want to do that is I want to tell you a story about my urban nerd journey. And so I did not grow up as an urban guy. I grew up around the inner city off of West Avenue and I-10. And my whole thought was, how do I get away from downtown, right? And so I want to tell you a story about one of my urban nerd professors, my informal urban nerd professors, and that's a guy named Graham Weston. He's my second professor of urban nerdery. My first professor was my pastor. He planted a church in downtown in 2008, and he asked me to be a part of it. And then in 2011, I was hired by Graham Weston. And for those of you who don't know, Graham Weston was the chairman of Rackspace. He was the majority shareholder. And now he is the co-founder of Weston Urban. He's the owner of Geekdom, the founder of Geekdom and the 80/20 Foundation. And so I first started working for him when I was 20 years old at Rackspace. We actually shared a cubicle, which is very terrifying if you're a 20-year-old. And then many years later, I went to go work with him. But he was one of my most important professors on downtown. And as a matter of fact, the Weston Center, which he brokered when he was 28 years old, was the birthplace of Rackspace, but it was also the birthplace of the first servers of YouTube. And so right after Rackspace got funding in the Weston Center, they got a call from the chairman of Sequoia Capital, which is one of their investors, and he said, hey, we just funded this little tiny company you've never heard of called YouTube, and we need 100 servers online overnight. And so the first servers of YouTube went online in his building in downtown San Antonio, which I just think is a cool little bit of tech trivia. And so I didn't realize it, but when I went to work for Graham in 2011, I was about to get my informal master's degree in urban nerd-isms. And so I didn't know it at the time. And so when I first started working for him, I worked for the 80/20 Foundation as its executive director, and we were completely focused on giving money to nonprofits that focused on downtown and the urban core. About 2 years later, he asked me to run Geekdom, which was the first co-working space of its time at that time in downtown, and we ended up taking over the Rand building, grew it. And then I joined the board of SA 2020. For those of you who don't know, in about 2010 or 2011, Mayor Julian Castro started a nonprofit called SA 2020. And one of the initiatives that he launched was called the Decade of Downtown. And this kicked off a whole bunch of growth that we're still benefiting from today. And so I joined that board, and then many years later, I co-founded this company, nonprofit called Tech Block. And that's a whole other different story, because it was around some controversy around Lyft and Uber. But anyways, so this I didn't realize was my informal master's degree in what it means to be urban. And so I want to tell you, I was working at all these companies, and the number one thing that I learned is that San Antonio had an underwhelming brand. This was the key insight. I was working for these companies. I was trying to recruit companies to San Antonio. I was trying to start companies in San Antonio, and I was trying to recruit young, single people to San Antonio. And what I discovered was we had the most underwhelming brand you could have. And so I want to talk about it. So let's talk about the first part of our brand, the Alamo. By the way, if you haven't been to see the new Alamo, it's incredible what they've done. But the old brand of the Alamo was very underwhelming. And the joke is that if you walked up to the Alamo and you'd never been there, the first thing you would think was, I thought it'd be bigger than that, right? It was just very, very, very underwhelming. But that was our brand globally. The second thing is this part of the Riverwalk. So the Riverwalk is one of the most incredible linear parks in any city in the world, but San Antonio is only famous for this one little part of the river. And for those of you that grew up here or live here, you know that there's no local at this part of the Riverwalk right now, okay? So this is the tourist zone, right? And so the only time I have to go to this part of the river is if my tia's visiting from out of town and I got to go take her for overpriced margaritas, right? And so there are no locals, but this is the brand of San Antonio. And so if the Spurs ever get back into the playoffs, God willing, that when they go to halftime, this is what they're going to show. This is the picture of San Antonio, right? It's the most famous one. This is part of our brand. I was in Mexico City one time. I got into a taxi cab. The taxi driver said, hey, where are you from? I said, I'm from San Antonio. He said, oh, La Cantera. I said, are you kidding me? The only thing you remember from my beloved city is a shopping center at 1604. This is unacceptable. Okay, La Cantera. This was the brand of our city to this guy, right? This is another one. This is the one that pains me the most, okay? We are famous. Our brand is a family city only. Okay, we are famous for being a family town. If you want to have a family, this is the place to be. But right now, we are a city that exports young, single people. So if you know a senior at UTSA or a senior at Trinity and you ask them, hey, you're about to graduate, where are you going to start those incredible career years? They're going to say, not in San Antonio, Texas, okay? They're going to imagine themselves in a city with an incredible urban core. They're going to imagine themselves in Austin or Miami or New York, okay? Not San Antonio. And this is part of our brand, the underwhelming brand that we had as a city. And last but not least, we're famous for the 3-2. Oh, do we love the 3-2? 3-bedroom, 2-bath, okay? We are famous for suburban sprawl. We are not famous for building high-density urban areas. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the young creative class congregates. Downtown is also your brand to the entire world. Austin is famous for 6th Street. If you're looking for economic opportunity, where do you look? You look to the nearest metropolis. You know, there's a great work done by Better Futures about the Southwest Triangle. And to everyone south of us, we are Manhattan. We are the bat signal. Come here for opportunity. And downtown is a critical part. And so what I wanted to walk you through today is something that I learned while I was being an urban nerd and trying to create companies and stuff, is that there are 3 components to a good urban core. And when your urban core is operating well, it is creating jobs, it is attracting and keeping young professionals, and it is creating very dense districts. And so I want to walk briefly through these 3 things. So let's talk about job creation. So this is young 20-year-old Lorenzo Gomez on my first day on the job at Rackspace, or as I like to say, this is my Slumdog Millionaire mugshot. I was 20 years old. I bought that shirt at Ross Dress for Less. It was too big for me, as you can see. And what I want to tell you about this story is that I was a 20-year-old Hispanic guy from the inner city of San Antonio, and this tech company hired me. I had no college degree, and I had no business working there, but this one company changed my life, gave me opportunity, gave me skills, gave me a network. And the reason that happened was because 3 Trinity graduates decided to stay in San Antonio and start a company in downtown San Antonio. And that one decision changed the trajectory of my life and so many thousands of raggers. And so I was at Rackspace. I joined Rackspace in 2001. I was an account manager. And we grew to one of the largest hosting companies in the world. We ended up buying Windsor Park Mall because we got so big. And it was this incredible time. It was an incredible time for me. And I learned so much while I was there. But there was one thing that I started noticing as I moved up the ranks and I started hiring people. And what I noticed is that you could always recruit someone to move to San Antonio that had a family, but I could not recruit anyone that was single. If they were young and single and I was trying to get them to move from Seattle, you know, they would say, I don't know about San Antonio. And it was just so frustrating. And so many years later, we went IPO, went public in 2008. And shortly thereafter, we acquired a company out of Blacksburg, Virginia called Webmail. And when we acquired that company, the 3 founders were required to move to San Antonio. 2 of those founders moved. One of them is still here. But the 3rd founder was absolutely diabolically opposed to moving to San Antonio. And so after a lot of back and forth, he sent an email to Graham that I've dramatically recreated for you in this, you remember the old 911 dramatic this is it. And so he sent this email to Graham and he said, Dear Graham, I know you're upset about me not moving to San Antonio, but I want you to stop calling me about it. I want you to stop harassing me about it. I will never move to San Antonio. And here's why. San Antonio has no downtown scene. It has no web developer scene. It has nowhere for me to go walk my dog. And instead, I'm moving to Austin, Texas. If you grew up in San Antonio, you hear this a lot. Austin is like your younger brother that's taller and more handsome and steals all your girlfriends. This happens all the time. And this was the moment that changed everything for Graham Weston. Graham Weston forwarded this email to Mayor Julian Castro, and he said, Mayor, this is the city we have to build if we ever want to keep our young people or if we want to recruit them back. And from that one email, Graham launched the 80/20 Foundation, Geekdom, and Weston Urban because of this one email. A couple of good books that I had to read. I didn't have to. I just decided to read. I'm an urban nerd. But I want to jump it because I'm pressed for time. Let's talk about young professionals. This is the key to everything. Everything hangs on the future workforce. And so one of the books that I read when I was working for Graham is a very, very influential book for me in my urban nerd path, and it's called Triumph of the City. It's written by a Harvard economist named Ed Glaeser. And Ed Glaeser is the only urbanist that I've ever come across that hits this point head on. I've never seen anyone else do it, and I love it. So he has a chapter in his book called Marriage Markets. And what he says in that chapter is very simple but very profound. He said the great cities of the world have a disproportionate pull on young single people because the statistical likelihood that they will meet their future spouse is so high that they will overcome all obstacles to go there. This is why New York is so expensive and it's still full of young people. This is why London is so expensive and it's full of young people. It's why Tokyo is so expensive and it's full of young people, because they have marriage markets. The statistical likelihood that my future best friend, husband, and wife are waiting for me there. And this is where San Antonio fails miserably. But hope is not lost. The reason this matters goes back to branding and storytelling. Young people need to see and imagine places where other young people are hanging out. So if I said, close your eyes and imagine Austin, where are all the young people? You imagine yourself on 5th Street, on Rainey Street, on 6th Street. You imagine it. But if I said, close your eyes and ask you, where do you imagine the young people of San Antonio hanging out? You cannot tell me a single place, unless it's a college campus, which doesn't count, right? They're sort of required to be there. This is a problem. So I want to tell you a story. Why does this matter? Why does this matter to you? So I went with Graham once to an event at the San Antonio Country Club. I was really upset because I had to put on a blazer and a tie. It was very upsetting to me. And so I went there, we gave this speech, and the speech was all women, mostly older women. And in the speech, Graham did this impromptu survey that blew my mind. He said, raise your hand if your kids moved away to college. And every woman in there raised her hand. You could see the peacock feathers just coming out. They were so proud. Absolutely. And then he said, keep your hands up if your kids moved back to San Antonio after they graduated. And I watched shame descend on like 200 ladies. Shame. And Graham said, this is the problem we have. We have to build a city good enough for your kids and my kids to want to come back to. And that's the whole game right there. And in this one moment, I saw the message of downtown connect with every person in that room. And I'll never forget it. After the speech was done, this old lady, she was so cute. This old lady comes up to Graham. She has her phone out. And she said, Graham, will you call my son and tell him all the things that you just told all of us right now? And I said, God bless her. She understood. She understood that there's a sales pitch for her sons and daughters, but she didn't have it. And so this is why I'm so excited to come give you the pitch, because you can go. This is Graham's personal mission statement, which I think is really incredible. And I think this is what all of the city leaders should think about. Do we have a city good enough for our kids to call home, to want to move back to? It's the whole game. So I want to tell you about Dan Gilbert. If you don't know Dan Gilbert is the king of Detroit. He's the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he's the owner of Quicken Loans. Guy's worth like $20 billion. And he had a huge effort many years ago to revitalize downtown Detroit. And so Graham, being an eternal learner, said, I want you to go visit and I want you to go study them. So Graham and I went to go study Dan Gilbert in Detroit. He had a conference that he was putting on. We went to it, and it was incredible. And while we were there, he told us a story about an internship program that he had started, where they bring in 2,000 college kids from around the Detroit area every year, and they hook them up with jobs, and they're doing all these things downtown. And he said something really awesome. He said, you know, the students, they care about skills and getting their resume, something on their resume. I don't care about it. I don't give a crap about that. He said, you know, the companies, they need help. They need some cheap labor. I don't care about that. Because you know what I care about? I care about selling downtown Detroit. I care about selling. He said, I want these kids working downtown, eating downtown, happy houring downtown, living downtown. I want them to imagine themselves having a career in downtown Detroit. And I thought, this guy's a genius. And if you haven't been to Detroit, you should go. It's incredible. That downtown is bouncing back. And so he's telling the story, and Graham and I are doing the elbow. We're elbowing each other. Dude. And so Graham and I came back to San Antonio, and the best form of flattery is copying. So we just copied him. And so we started our own internship program. We partnered with Trinity University first, and then we expanded, and it's called Students Plus Startups. That was a direct result of us going to another urban center and just copying what they were doing. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Let's talk about districts and density. This is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. This is when you know I'm a nerd, right? I love density. And so I think that the great cities are built on great urban districts. And spoiler alert, San Antonio is terrible at it. We're sitting in one of the greatest urban districts there is, right? It's an incredible, incredible development, the Pearl. But the great cities of the world are built on urban districts. And so at the time when I was running Geekdom in 80/20, there was another guy, another entrepreneur in downtown Las Vegas named Tony Hsieh. And he was the CEO of Zappos. Anybody remember Zappos, the shoe company? You might have bought too many shoes from them like I did. Great company. He moved this company from California to downtown Vegas. He set up shop in the old city hall, and then he put aside $250 million that he had got from their Amazon acquisition into a fund just dedicated to revitalizing their old downtown, old Fremont Street. And he had spent millions, but he passed away a couple years ago. And so Graham said, I want you to go study them. So I went to go meet with Tony Hsieh. And he said, Lorenzo, we're in the business of facilitating the serendipitous collision of ideas. And it was like poetry. I almost fainted. It was so romantic. I just said, oh my gosh, I love this guy. And what I realized after that visit is that the serendipitous collision of ideas is where all the magic happens. The collision of ideas is where people meet their spouses. It's where they meet their best friends. It's where two co-founders meet up and say, oh my God, you hate that problem too? Let's start a company. The collision of ideas only happens in dense urban nodes. And I'm going to tell you where it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen on a Chili's at 1604. That's not where the collision of ideas happens, all right? It happens in places like the Pearl, like Hemisphere. It happens in places like Geekdom. And so one of the things that Tony Hsieh did that was awesome is he took some of his money and he started a shipping container park right off Fremont Street. It's incredible. But he was a proponent of districts. And this is what we need to embrace in San Antonio, a city of districts. You go to Chinatown. Chinatown is my favorite example of a district because it's like 200 or 300 restaurants all next to each other. Most entrepreneurs would hate this. You're going to put another Mexican restaurant next to my Mexican restaurant? What are you talking about? No, go Chinatown every day. People want options. 6th Street is one of the most famous districts in the whole world. You put 100 bars next to each other and you just let people go. Now, the problem with San Antonio is this makes us all have hives. This gives us a rash, okay? Well, oh my God, what are these young people? They're going to throw up everywhere. That music's going to be so loud. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a place for young people to go crazy. That's what we need, okay? The collision of ideas. Last but not least, the beautiful, the lovely Pearl. It's incredible. I can't compliment the Pearl enough because they've done it so thoughtfully, so beautifully. And so this is a beacon of what the rest of the city should be copying. This is just a quick thing. This is how I define districts. This is just my own urban thing, but I think a district is where you have at least 20 or more things within walkable distance from each other. That's the key. And the reason I show you this is that in San Antonio, we're allergic to density. We put one thing over here, and we put another thing way over here. We make you get in your car and we drive to it. And this is what the great cities of the world have. They have massive density. All right, skip this around town. All right, I want to take a picture. Raise your hand if you know Curry Boys, if you've been to Curry Boys. All right, yes. I couldn't have said this up. So the guy on the left, his name is Sean Nguyen. These are the two founders of Curry Boys. They have another founder named Andrew who's not in this picture. But I met Sean Nguyen through a nonprofit called Venture for America. I was CEO of Geekdom at the time, and I had these fellows coming in, and one of them said, hey, I have a buddy. He's from Houston, wants to get back to Texas. He hates where he's at in Baltimore. And so I flew him in, and I had an instant guy crush on him. I mean, you look at this guy. He's just effortlessly cool. Look at those tattoos. I mean, he's just so upsetting. And so I interviewed him. I said, hey, you got the job. So he moves to San Antonio. And actually, the way that I recruited him was that I orchestrated his whole day. We did a bike ride through King William. I didn't let him leave 410. I was like, don't leave 410. We went through King William. We had lunch, Station Cafe, and then I closed the deal at Feast. Anybody remember Feast in Southtown? I never lost a deal at Feast. I had 1,000% close rate at Feast. And so I said, this is the San Antonio that we're building. It's not all like this, but don't worry about that. And so he moves to San Antonio, moves downtown. Then he convinces his best friend, Andrew, who's a chef, to come to San Antonio. He says, hey, this place has got a lot going on. And so he's working for me at Geekdom, and he invites me to a pop-up. He was doing a pop-up at Dorcho Distillery on Southtown. And so I went to this pop-up, and I had one of their banh mi sandwiches. It was incredible. I said, dude, you should do a brick and mortar. So you ever thought about doing a brick and mortar? He said, yeah, absolutely. And so I called Randy Smith from Western Urban. I said, hey, I got this guy. They got an amazing product. And so Randy leased them some space at the bottom of the Rand downtown. And then after that, they closed it down eventually, and they opened up Curry Boys here, and they've expanded it, and they were ranked number 4 in all of Yelp reviews in all of Texas. They've got 2 James Beard nominations, and they have just opened up their 3rd location in Nashville, Texas. And this is what's crazy. This is why I love this story, is that you might be thinking, hey, I'm not a Graham Weston, and I'm not a Dan Gilbert, and I'm not a Kit Goldsberry. So how can I affect downtown? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Curry Boys is one young professional moving to San Antonio, convincing one best friend, doing one pop-up with one introduction and one small business and one customer for life. And so you don't have to be Graham Weston. You don't have to be a fancy real estate developer. You don't have to be Dan Gilbert. What you need to do is do one of these things. If everyone in this room convinced one young professional or one of their best friends or went to one pop-up in downtown, supported one small business in downtown, and became a customer for life, our downtown would be dramatically changed forever. This is what's possible for you and I, and this is what we must do to build the city of the future that we need. Anybody down with that? All right, let's do it. So last but not least, this is my shameless plug. Co-founder of a online contributor-based content site called Voice San Antonio. My 2 co-founders are here, Ellie and Dan. Raise your hand, they're the best. And what we do is we take stories from people like you about what's going on downtown. But I have a column called The Urban Nerd where I write all the time about it. And I'm just writing about downtown. And what I want to tell you is I want to issue you the challenge that I would love and welcome any articles that you all have about the things going on downtown, the people moving and shaking, the small businesses that are starting, because this is the way we're going to change that brand, is through storytelling. All right, that's my talk. Thank you so much for letting me nerd out with you. Appreciate it.
One more time, get up for Lorenzo Gomez. On behalf of Urbanization and ABLDP, got a gift for you. Thank you so much for being here. At this time, we're going to be transitioning to our panel. Oh, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.